In today's video, we'll be explaining the greatest Enter the Gungeon co-op speedrun of all time. Rest assured, these runs are a whole new beast in Gungeon speedrunning, so we have a whole lot to cover. If you enjoy this video, please do consider subscribing. I make videos talking about roguelikes and the speedruns surrounding them all the time, so if you're into that sort of thing, this is the place to find it. Now, let's get into the video. Now, a lot of you may believe that Enter the Gungeon co-op runs would just be a faster version of any percent runs, right? Naturally, having two players traversing the Gungeon together would mean that the total outputted damage would be double that of a normal run, and thus the run would go by much quicker. However, as I was surprised to see, the any percent co-op world record is 10 minutes and 35 seconds, which is a whopping 3 minutes and 44 seconds slower than the regular any percent world record. On that same note, the record is held by everyone's favorite bullet-using Gungeon speedrunner Napalm. If you haven't seen my previous videos on Gungeon speedrunning, Napalm is a behemoth in the Gungeon speedrunning scene. Having battled it out with Hologun in the past for the any percent record, they are now the first and only player to have performed a sub 7 minute any percent Gungeon run. Not to mention the numerous other records that they hold, all of which have a very comfortable lead ahead of all other runners. Of course, a co-op speedrun consists of two players, and joining Napalm atop the leaderboard is a runner named Gingam. Unfortunately, Gingam doesn't have much of a history to unpack, having only 3 submitted runs on speedrun.com, 2 of which are co-op runs with Napalm. It is worth mentioning that they have a slightly better time than I do in regular any percent, so as far as I'm concerned, this is a great runner. Of course, we must address the elephant in the room. How is the single player any percent time so much faster than the co-op any percent time? Well, there are a number of factors to be taken into consideration here. Firstly, all enemy health is increased by 40% to somewhat balance out the double damage that would normally be dealt. Plus, in order to move on to another room within a chamber, both players must be at the door ready to move on. Thus, there is a significant time loss in waiting for whichever player is farthest away from the door to catch up to the other player. On that same note, both players must quickly come to an agreement as to which door they plan to go down. While a solo player can instantly act upon all of their decisions, that same player has to talk to their teammate before going through a certain door, opening a certain chest, or buying a certain item. Outside of the gameplay itself, I imagine you also have to find a time that works best for both players to grind out runs, which might mean there's a lot less opportunity to grind runs out. All in all, there's quite a few reasons co-op runs might be slower, but the gameplay itself remains just as complex and exciting, if not more exciting, than a traditional any percent Enter the Gungeon run. Getting into the run itself, Napalm plays as the bullet, and Gingam plays as the cultist. If you aren't familiar with co-op runs, the cultist is a character exclusive to co-op mode and is the only character that player 2 can play as. They can use all the same items and weapons as player 1, they just have little choice as to what items and weapons they want to start with. Moving through the first chamber, Napalm and Gingam divide and conquer by targeting separate enemies within each room. Only against enemies with very high health do they unify their attacks, or when there is simply only one enemy left in the room. Napalm uses a technique called guard flashing, which, if you haven't seen my video on the any percent world record, is a technique that allows the damage of the sword swipe to have a much wider range. Because of this, along with the general efficiency of the sword, Napalm is able to clear most of the enemies himself, though Gingam offers support by attacking whichever enemies are outside of Napalm's range. With Napalm clearing enemies with his sword blasphemy and Gingam offering effective support, the duo reaches the first boss in a mere 45 seconds. The first chamber boss ends up being the Gatling Gull, which is convenient because the Gatling Gull has the least amount of health out of the 3 possible first chamber bosses, and also generally only attacks by shooting a volley of bullets in a single direction. Thus, the plan is for Napalm to take on the brunt of the Gull's attacks, as Napalm can swipe away the bullets from the Gull's attacks. Meanwhile, Gingam stays close behind the Gull and shoots a barrage of bullets at it, offering a supportive blank whenever Napalm is dodge rolling to prevent him from taking damage. Napalm taking damage is bad not just because it means he's losing health, but because the bullet character relies on having full health due to the sword blasphemy shooting a projectile out of it while the player is at full health. Thus, Napalm taking damage is inexcusable as it could result in significant time loss within boss fights. 28 seconds after entering the boss room, the duo defeats the goal, and 1 minute and 21 seconds into the run, Napalm and Gingam enter the second chamber. Now usually, in single player Gungeon, the timer starts once the player moves upon entering a new chamber. The player can switch their weapons, look at the map, look in their inventory, all that good stuff. But as soon as they move, the timer starts. In co-op, the timer doesn't actually start when the cultist starts moving. Thus, they can move freely without the timer starting so long as player 1 doesn't move. Of course, this would be more useful if both players didn't have to be standing next to a door to move on, but I digress. Gingam gets a brief head start while Napalm waits for them to reach the door, as Napalm obviously moves faster than Gingam with the sword. Once Gingam is close to the door, Napalm catches up and they both start to dash through the second chamber. This chamber goes by rather slow, as Gingam is still equipped only with their starter weapon. Plus, the chamber generation isn't very generous, as there were 7 whole rooms between the elevator and the entrance to the boss chamber. However, after a minute and 6 seconds, the duo reaches the second boss, the Beholster. Similarly to the first chamber boss, Napalm runs up close to deal direct damage with the sword and deflect the majority of enemy attacks, while Gingam keeps their distance and delivers consistent damage from afar. This boss fight ends up being a bit longer than the previous one, but finally, after 3 minutes in the Gungeon, Gingam has a weapon besides their starter dart gun. Or rather, Napalm has the weapon, but only because Napalm is closer and thus is able to grab it much faster than Gingam would be able to. And, sure enough, when the duo reaches the third chamber, Napalm drops the combined rifle for Gingam to pick up and use. Sometimes I forget this weapon is only considered a B tier weapon by the Enter the Gungeon wiki because this thing does some massive damage if you're a speedrunner. Anyways, after some discussion, the two decide to take the door going downwards. Gingam takes a little bit of a fall in the first room, but it only costs 2 seconds of time loss, and the duo continues forward into some enemy rooms, where Gingam immediately begins utilizing one of the most vital tricks in Enter the Gungeon speedrunning. By dropping a gun and immediately picking it back up, runners are able to skip the long reload times, but also are able to prevent a gun with multiple forms from switching forms, meaning Gingam can continuously use the more powerful, single-shot form of the combined rifle to instantly vaporize all the weak enemies that stand in their way. Because the combined rifle instantly kills most enemies in the regular rooms of the Gungeon and can also kill multiple enemies with a single shot, Gingam is now able to match Napalm in enemy killing efficiency, meaning the two clear rooms much quicker. The one drawback of using the combined rifle's powerful form is that it uses a lot of ammo. So without stocking up on more ammo, Gingam has only 50 shots before they can go back to their weak dart gun. Thus, when ammo drops, the two are forced to pick it up, which costs a little bit of time. However, the combined rifle causes a net time save rather than time loss due to its immense power, so the two gladly take the time to grab ammo for it. Naturally, because of the duo's crazy speed, they end up reaching the third boss just short of 4 minutes into the run, and while they may not employ any particularly new strats while fighting the third boss, they are able to obliterate it in only 23 seconds due to the combined power of the combined rifle and blasphemy. Entering the fourth chamber, Gingam only has 317 ammo within their combined rifle, which equates to 31 shots, so naturally, they're looking out for some more ammo. Going into the fourth chamber, nothing too special happens, though Gingam allows Napalm to guard flash all the weaker zombie bullets in order to conserve ammo. Luckily, within the third room of the fourth chamber, Gingam finds a much appreciated ammo refill and moves on. Within the fifth room, Napalm takes a bit of damage, thus disabling his blasphemy projectile, though this doesn't stop him from guard flashing and dealing a wide area of damage. Even when Napalm has the blasphemy projectile, Gingam deals slightly more damage than Napalm, as they are able to kill certain enemies that take Napalm more than one sword swing to wipe out, though admittedly the sword swipe is notably faster than the combined rifle. The seventh room in this chamber ends up being a dead end for the duo, so they move back to the fifth room and attempt to go in another direction. If you haven't noticed already, the fourth chamber is pretty rough for Napalm and Gingam, but they still managed to reach the fourth boss in a mere 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Now, you might be worried about the duo, seeing as how Napalm has lost his powerful projectile blast from blasphemy, but thinking quickly, Napalm drops the master round from the first chamber, thus leaving him with only 3 hearts, but technically resulting in Napalm being back at full health, so Blasphemy's magic projectile returns for the boss fight. The duo employs the same strategy they employed for all the previous bosses, though at one point the High Priest goes into an attack that would usually prevent it from being damaged. Luckily, there's a secret exploit that allows Blasphemy's attack to damage the High Priest while it is supposed to be shrouded in darkness, which is yet another reason why Blasphemy is the greatest weapon in Enter the Gungeon. After quickly shredding through the 4th boss, and with a brief moment of hesitation, Napalm and Gingam move on to the 5th chamber 7 minutes and 12 seconds into their run. Napalm and Gingam spend a moment talking about something. I assume they're talking about where to go, but I can't really speak Japanese, so I won't make any claims as to what they're saying. However, after a brief moment, they decide to go left and move on with their run. After the 3rd room, the duo buys their first and last item in this run, the Andromeda Strain, which permanently decreases the health of all enemies by 25%. In the 4th room, Napalm falls into the lava, causing him to once again lose Blasphemy's projectile, and within this same room, Gingam actually dies. Though Napalm is quick to revive his friend, and the two immediately move on to the final boss. Since Napalm is damaged, he can't use his sword to its max ability, thus, he takes Gingam's combined rifle, and Gingam takes Napalm's Frost Giant, which he acquired after beating the 4th boss. The Frost Giant is a weapon whose fire rate is determined by how quickly the player is able to fire the weapon, and Gingam clearly is able to fire the weapon pretty quickly, as they managed to fire 120 rounds into the Dragon in only a single minute, while also dodge rolling enemy projectiles and reloading every 6 rounds. Meanwhile, Napalm shoots the Dragon with the combined rifle's main attack, which just so happens to bounce off walls. Thus, each combined rifle shot is able to bounce off the back wall and hit the Dragon twice. When the Dragon is at around half health, Napalm abandons this however and goes back to using his sword, which is able to shoot the magic projectiles as Napalm drops the 2nd chamber master round, putting him at 4 hearts. The sword also ends up being extremely useful in the 2nd phase of the boss fight, as Napalm can just swipe away all the enemy projectiles rather than have both players try to dodge them. Once the heart is shown on the 2nd phase, the duo fires a number of rounds into the heart, and together they manage to finish off the boss on the 1st cycle of the 2nd phase. At this point, all that's left for them is to dash past the corpse of the Dragon and fire the gun that can kill the past, thus ending the run. The previous record in this category is also held by Napalm, though he's paired up with another runner named Kurone 3, and they are a singular second slower than Gingam and Napalm's run. Honestly, there's a lot to optimize within this category. As a matter of fact, I'm so confident that this record can and will be beaten, I'll offer a bounty to any duo who feels up for the challenge. I'll give $100 to the first team that can beat this run, though if Napalm is the one who beats it, that won't count in my eyes. Sorry Napalm, we gotta give other runners a fighting chance. Of course, if you enjoy this content and want to see more speedrunning bounties, my Patreon is a great way to ensure I keep this channel going and I run fun events like this one. I'll be sending the first 50 patrons a signed custom sticker pack to show my appreciation, though if you miss that threshold, don't worry, there will be more Patreon perks to come. No pressure though, just subscribing to this channel is enough to make me happy. Thanks for watching everyone.